under communism and actually found the courage to escape it. What my biggest concern is today is what we're witnessing here in America. And what we're witnessing is the rise of communism. And it's like a cancer. It starts a little bit, and if you don't eradicate it, it spreads, it metastasizes. And that's what my biggest fear is today. And for a long time, I was talking with one of the people earlier, and they said, you know, it used to be a fringe issue. But look at what the Democrats are doing. They are electing Democratic socialists. I don't know what they call them. They put a pretty little name on it. But they're electing communism. And you said it earlier today, Nicole. We did a press conference, and she called it the Communist Caucus. And I think it's true. You can. Socialism is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and we have to call it out. And part of what we need to do is we need to educate people where communism comes from, but where it leads to. And that's not the people that system is the people in that system are bad. It's bad policy. And we've seen what happens. Look at the posters around the room. But I thought instead of me talking about it in a textbook style fashion, I thought what it would be even more powerful and impactful is to hear from a couple of my colleagues, as well as from all of you who actually lived and experienced communism firsthand. I thought that would be a much better education because you have real life experiences, and I think people, the American people, really need to understand if they want to go down this communist road with the Democratic Party, where that's going to lead. And I know us as Republicans are going to fight tooth and nail. So the floor is yours. I'm going to start it out with my colleague, Nicole Meliotakis.
Thank you.
To talk about and share some of her issues, comments, thoughts.
Well, thank you very much for participating, and I thank our conference chairwoman, McLean, for hosting this important discussion. I think it's incredibly important that we talk about this issue and call out socialism for what it is, and communism what it is. And really, socialism is communism light. Those of us who have families who escaped communism know that it starts incrementally and starts with socialism, and either you reverse course, as we saw happen in many of the countries now, in South America and Central America, in Greece even went down the socialist route at one point. They turn back in time, or they turn out like Venezuela, Cuba, and so many of the countries that you're from. What I would say is that this is important that we have this discussion, number one, to educate the American people about what exactly communism, socialism is, and the threats that it faces here. And we need you to tell the stories and share your experiences about how it destroyed your families, what these regimes stole from you, how it starts off incrementally, how it basically leads to bare shelves, lack of food, lack of medicine. My mother fled communist Cuba, and they stole my grandfather's gas station, his small business. They stole his home. My mother came to the United States and never saw her father again. That's the reality. It's that they steal from people, they steal from you, and that's redistribution of wealth, of course, but they do it to make themselves powerful and wealthy, the people at the top, while everyone lives in misery. So this idea that the socialists are trying to sell it as an affordability, right? It's going to make life more affordable and accessible is just ludicrous, because it's the exact opposite that happens. And so I think, number one, we need to hear your stories. We need to share those stories. We need to get those stories out there so people understand. Because sadly, too many people born here in the United States don't know what it's like in other countries. They don't know what it's like, and they don't appreciate that we're here in the United States with the freedoms, with the liberties, with the opportunities that you have. And that is why we have to get that out there. And then we need to focus on our education system. How do we make sure that it's not being infiltrated as it is, indoctrination, teaching people revisionist history, and that we are making sure our youth understands what's the alternative in these other countries that have been destroyed by these very policies. And I brought up just one example I'll bring up, like packing the Supreme Court. These are things that the Democrats talk about all the time, right? They talk about it all the time. They want to pack, that's just one of the examples. My mayor, Mondani in New York City, talks about seizing the means of production. He talks about abolishing private property rights. Talks about government-run supermarkets, which we now lead to those empty shelves and bread lines. Those three things are right out of the communist playbook. So anyone who wants to deny that this guy's a communist, I mean, literally, his campaign platform was right out of Karl Marx's communist playbook. And then the packing of the Supreme Court. We hear that all the time from the Democrats. And who did that? Venezuela did it, right? They packed the Supreme Court from 20 to 32 justices, 40,000 cases ruled in Maduro and Chavez's favor, destroyed the richest country in South America. And now they want to bring packing the Supreme Court here as well. So these are the things that we need to make sure that people understand, and it starts by having these discussions and making sure it not just stays in this room, but it gets out there, and that's why we are thankful for the media being here to cover this.
Thank you, Nicole. Now I'm going to turn it over to the gentlelady from Indiana, who herself has some very interesting stories, but I'd like to get your opinion, Victoria. Ms. Sparks. Yeah, she lived it.
Okay, that works. Thank you so much, and I appreciate organizing that. Someone who grew up and was born in USSR, I guess, growing up under communism and socialism, may be crazy enough to be a politician now, but truly, it's very alarming for me to see what's happening in the country and how many people sacrifice their life to how many Americans to defeat oppression and communist socialist agenda. So I was trained by Marxists. Back in school, you had to memorize Karl Marx back in Soviet Union schools. All students had to do it. You were tested on that. And if you think about it, Marx's ideology, it's very dangerous. And if you read about Hayek and what's been happening in the last century around Europe particularly, how they use all of this good propaganda and agenda will have equality, will have everyone is going to be equal, and ended up you'll have a political elites on top. That's what socialism is. And communism is really the top, of communist socialism, right? And you have political elites on top, and then everyone else is equally poor. And you have a ruling class. And to be able, we're all different individuals, we all have different things, right? So to be able to force us to do what centralized government wants to do, elites on top, they don't live the same rules, they have their own perks, and they have a totally different life. You have to oppress. So you can need to create an oppressive system of government, and you can call it whatever you want, but it is an oppression. It's an oppression, and a lot of people get killed oppression because some people don't want to do it, and we see how many people become victims and die to fight for this freedom. You see in former Soviet Union, for most republics, most of them couldn't recover from it. Still now, Ukraine is still fighting over 30 years and people dying. Millions of lives getting destroyed all around the world. So for me to see when people openly in the United States of America to promote Marxist propaganda, that is dangerous. And Hayek warned us, how liberty can be lost little by little. So if you think about it, you have to give credit Marxists. From the beginning of the last century, they start eroding a lot of values, right? Property rights, your liberties, your Second Amendment rights, your religious rights, your health care. They want to have government control. That's how you weaken the people, and then you try to oppress them, buy them, and brainwash by using government money. And this is becoming so significant in our country, where now they became so emboldened, they actually not even hide. They're openly running on Marxist propaganda, and they're openly winning this election. So I think it's our job. I think Aristotle said the most important job of a legislator, is to teach young people what kind of government creating and what made America great. People are all the same around the world. We're the greatest country in the world because we have the most freedom. That's what made America great. And if we lose this freedom, we're not going to be the greatest country in the world. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your story, because this is is, a lot of people who live in oppression, they have enormous appreciation for freedom, so we have to, because we cannot lose this republic, because in this 250th anniversary, we're in a danger zone. And I think a lot of, freedom-loving people warned that, this, and Marx actually said that socialism and Marxism is inevitable, but we have to wake up. A lot of people like Friedman and Hayek said people can wake up and maybe reverse some of the things, so we better wake up very soon. But hopefully you can be that voice to help us out. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for help waking us up. I appreciate it. Victoria, Ms. Sparks is very passionate. She's lived it. Another gentleman that I want to introduce you to is my friend Carlos Jimenez from Florida. Carlos, why don't you talk a little bit about your experiences as well?
Thank you, Lisa, and certainly is a pleasure for me to be here. I'm the only Cuban-born member of Congress. I was actually lived under communism for almost 7 years. My family fled Cuba, seeking freedom, and I have to thank my father and my mother for bringing me to this great country. They left everything behind. They came with $10 and a watch, which I still have the watch. And then just seeking freedom for themselves, but also seeking freedom for us. And my sister and I will be eternally grateful to our parents for bringing us to this great country, this country which I love so much. I guess what strikes me is that a lot of young people are falling for the trap and the glitter of socialism, communism, and it really is, for me, those folks that say, no, I'm not a communist, I'm a democratic socialist, is a buzzword for I'm a communist. All right, and so because I've heard this before, and so I'm gonna go back a little bit in history and tell you why I know I've seen communism. I know what a communist looks like, and a lot of people are falling for this, this glitter that is communism, free stuff. I will tell you that there's nothing for free, and if you fall for it, at the end you will pay for it with one thing: your freedom. You will pay for it with your freedom. And so in 2025, about 66 years after Fidel Castro appeared on Meet the Press, New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mandami was asked a very familiar question on the same program: are you a communist? His answer was, no, I'm not. Instead, he described himself as a democratic socialist. That's a buzzword for communists, by the way, saying democratic socialism is about guaranteeing housing, health care, and transit as rights rather than commodities. And I'll show you what housing looks like in Cuba pretty soon. But listen to the language he used when the national media isn't pressing him for a moderate answer. Speaking at the 2021 Young Democratic Socialists of America conference, Mandami didn't mince his words about his movement's true destination, declaring, "We have to be unapologetic about our socialism because seizing the means of production is the end goal." So let me show you what seizing the means of production means in practical terms. So I have a couple of pictures here. So we're going to be looking at East Germany and West Germany. Same people, same language. The only thing that divided them was a wall, okay? And in East Germany, they were producing this. It's rated as the worst car ever produced. And by the way, you had to wait in line to get one, years probably, all right? Now in West Germany, just across the way, just on the other side of the wall, they were producing Mercedes-Benz, one of the most coveted cars in the world. What's the difference? The difference is the system and the lies that communism breeds. Later on, when he stood at City Hall for his inauguration, he declared, "We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism." People really need to listen to what these people say, all right? America was built on individualism, individual rights, and the talents of the individual. Do not be fooled by the promises of warmth. It is the fire from hell. He also declared, "To those who insist that the era of big government is over, hear me when I say this: no longer will the City Hall hesitate to use its power to improve New Yorkers' lives. Don't fall for that one either. It's not going to improve anybody's life. All they're going to do is suppress the people. I've heard leaders reject the communist label before. I have heard leaders promise that the government only wants to help working people before. I've heard promises of greater equality, more benefits, better future. These promises sound very familiar, especially to me, okay? And to those who sat down to meet the press, and to those who sat down to meet the press in 1961, and to anyone who escaped Castro's Cuba. And now I'm going to go to Meet the Press, 1961. Meet the Press, 1961, introducing all of America to Fidel Castro. By the way, Fidel, the revolution was actually supported by the Cuban people, not because he was a communist, but because he was there to free the people from a dictatorship. And he made a lot of promises. In the early days of the revolution, Castro framed his movement not as a radical communist takeover, but as a uniquely Cuban populist effort. He famously declared, "Esta revolución es tan verde como las palmas." This revolution is as green as the palms. Green. Green New Deal stuff? Hey, what do you know? In 1959, just months after taking power, Fidel Castro appeared on NBC's Meet the Press. Americans and the world wanted to know who he really was. He looked straight at the camera and he said, "I am not a communist. I am not agreed with communists." He insisted that communist influence in his government was non-existent. Their influence in government is nothing. Democracy is my ideal, really. When asked about his brother Raul, who had traveled to the Soviet Union, he replied, no, he's not a communist. If he was a communist, I would tell you. And when questioned about democratic elections, Castro claimed that the Cuban people prioritized stability over immediate voting, saying, "The people don't want elections right now. The people want work, peace, and progress first." He assured the public that elections would take place. Once we will call elections as soon as possible, but it will take time because we have to rebuild the country first. I think that in no case will it be more than 4 years. Castro's conditions, however, included when the conditions are right and the political parties have time to organize on a fair basis. Now remember, political parties, it'll come back in a second. What was originally promised to the Cuban people to take 4 years has now become 67 years. And the Cuban people are still waiting for those elections. Instead came censorship, political prisoners, confiscated property, one-party rule, and the destruction of a free press and economy. As Castro consolidated power, the democratic hope dissolved. On December 2nd, 1961, just 2.5 years after saying he was not a communist, during a televised 5-hour address to the nation, Castro shed all the former, pretense and declared, "I am a Marxist-Leninist, and I shall be a Marxist-Leninist to the end of my life." In that same address, he acknowledged that his radical beliefs hadn't emerged overnight. He just didn't turn into a communist, but he had been intentionally hidden to secure power. Ever since college, I have been fundamentally influenced by Marxism. We have to disassemble our radical views earlier, but now I can say I believe absolutely in Marxism. This absolute control was codified into the nation's legal system. Article 5 of both the 1976 and 2019 Cuban Constitution explicitly enshrines a communist society and single-party dominance. This is part of the Constitution. The Communist Party of Cuba, unique, Martiano, Fidelista, and Marxist-Leninist, the organized vanguard of the Cuban nation, sustained in its democratic character as well as its permanent linkage to the people, its superior driving force of the society and the state. Its organizers, and it organizes and orients the communal forces towards the construction of socialism and the progress towards a communal society. It works to preserve and to fortify the patriotic unity of the Cuban people and to develop ethic, moral, and civic values. That sounds kind of, well, okay, they like the communist system, but in the Article 5 establishes the Communist Party as the superior driving force of society and state. Any attempts to advocate for multi-party democracy challenges the party's authority to organize political opposition is treated as an attack on the Constitution itself. That principle is then enforced through Article 120 of Cuba's new penal code, which falls under offenses against the constitutional order. Whoever arbitrarily exercises any right or freedom recognized in the Constitution of the Republic and endangers the constitutional order and the normal functioning of the Cuban state and government incurs the sanctions of deprivation of liberty of 4 to 10 years. Basically, you are treated with treason, all right? These laws make peaceful exercise of fundamental rights, including free speech, peaceful assembly, and protest, a criminal act wherever it challenges the government or the communist political system. In Cuba, dissent is not merely discouraged, it is criminalized. Speaking out against the regime is treated as a crime against the state, and those who dare to do so risk imprisonment, persecution, or exile. And that's not only Cuba, that's every single communist state that I know. I will show you one more picture. It talks about housing. And all socialists, Democrats, oh, free, equal housing for all. I'll show you some housing, okay? So, this is where I lived in 1959. That's my office building. That's my condo building. Well, my dad's anyway, my dad and mom, right? It's called Edificio Rio Mar. It still stands to this day. It's in the Miramar section of Havana, all right? This is what we call housing in communist Cuba. Same building 2 years ago.
But it's free, right?
Oh, it's free. Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, there are people still living in there.
Wow.
All this promise of housing, health care, et cetera, is just that. There is no health care in Cuba. They have no medicines. The hospitals are a shambles. It's free to everybody. It really is. But you get what you pay for when it comes to Cuba. And so if I seem, again, a little bit emotional about this, it's because I've seen this before. I've seen the picture before. I've seen smiling communists before, too. Here, take a look at this. Bearded, smiling communists, okay? Where they promise you the world, free stuff, and you pay for it with your freedom. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Jimenez is very passionate, but I think he brings a lot of color, and more than anything, he brings the truth. Another, our last representative that I want you to hear from is Maria Salazar, who again is very passionate about this issue.
And thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Wonderful to be working with you and for you to have put together this very important roundtable, because in reality, we're talking to those who are listening to us outside of the Capitol. I mean, that's a very tough act to follow, because he was born in Cuba. I'm the daughter of political refugees. I was born in Miami shortly thereafter, after my parents, like your parents, had to go through and endure the democratic socialist promises. The problem we have in this country is that people do not have a point of reference, because the abundance and the beauty of the American system, not only on the economic side, but on the political side, the freedoms, like you were saying, blinds those who do not understand or believe that there is another world called socialism. I'm not going to extend my testimony as much as you, but that is why I'm so passionate, Lisa, because unfortunately the Democratic Party has been infiltrated by this virus called socialism, which is in reality not socialism, it's Marxism, and then it's communism. They are presenting to the voters, people who do not have the same opportunities as others, that this is, like you said, affordability. That's one of the problems that we are confronting as a country. I mean, the democratic system is not perfect, but still the best system around, just like capitalism. It has its flaws, but there is no other economic model that brings more prosperity to the nations than capitalism. The problem right now that we have is that they are selling this theory. They have never tasted the practice, and that is the big problem that we're facing this country, and that's why the Republican Party, according to my opinion, is not perfect, but it's not socialist, and has not been infiltrated by this virus, that it's pernicious. Because the big problem with the issue that we have right now is that the democratic socialists, the Marxists or the communists, they know how to use the democratic institutions to infiltrate and to penetrate health, the electoral system, the educational system, the cultural system. They infiltrate them little by little, and then they destroy them. And that is what's happening right now. And the problem is that once they grab it, it's like the pit bull, that it's going to be very hard for us to be able to move away from that, from yank it back to the forces of freedom. It happened in Venezuela. I was a news reporter. I covered Venezuela before Chavez and after Chavez. Venezuela, 25 years ago, that's nothing. That's a blink of an eye when it comes to history. 25 years ago was the most prosperous country in the Western Hemisphere, A. B. They had the largest reserves of oil, and they were exporting 3 million barrels a day. Right now, they're exporting less than 700,000. But then Chavez came, and he promised to the Venezuelans through the free electoral system in Venezuela that he was going to give those who did not have the same type of opportunities for affordability, he was going to share the wealth because they were such a wonderful and rich country. And he was going to make everybody enjoy the fruits of what the country had. And that's when he came in, because Fidel Castro told him, look, let's do it now another way, not the way I did it in 1960 when I came in and I confiscated everything. Now let's use the democratic institutions for you to be able to go in and never get out until January 3rd, when a guy by the name of Donald Trump went and sent our military forces and took him out. Otherwise, they would have never ceded power. So that is the problem that we have right now. And the Venezuelans, people say, well, you know, we're not Venezuela. We are in English and they are in Spanish. It doesn't matter. It's the same type of system penetrating our institutions. That's why I say that we need to win elections, because elections preserve the democratic system. Now I just want to finish with introducing someone who lived it. This guy next to me, his name is José Daniel Ferrer. Nobody knows better the horrors of communism. He lived it. He was just a very prominent opposition leader in Havana. He just came out because of the Trump administration. He was arrested 4 times. He spent 15 years in a grand total of 15 years in prison in different occasions, just because he spoke out. The regime sentenced him to death by firing squad for collecting signatures, just collecting signatures for a petition. He just wanted to collect signatures so he could petition the authorities to change the Constitution. I remember when I was a news reporter, that's why I'm delighted to be here next to him. I remember that I was on the air saying, we haven't seen José Daniel Ferrer in 1 month, in 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, 8 months. No one really knew what he was going through, the torturing, the lack of food, the hunger strikes. But always the United States was saying to the Castro regime, don't touch him. Don't touch him, because he was able to put together, he became the most important opposition leader on the island, because he put together the UNPACU, which was this widespread organization of volunteers. And for that reason, he was put time after time after time. So I think that if anyone else can explain to us the horrors of communism, which he felt right on his skin, it's him. And I am delighted to be able to introduce him, and he has you have no other message or better message than all of us, because unfortunately you lived it. So I'm not sure if we can give him the floor. Absolutely. And José Daniel Ferrer, no doubt about it, he just came out of Cuba, thanks to the efforts of the United States Congress, still the best country on earth. So thank you.
In that vein, I love democracy. I have to go vote in committee. So do you mind taking over? But I just wanted to say before I leave, thank you very much. Please tell your stories. Please communicate with the media. And the media, I really hope you begin to cover this, because this is a grave problem that we are facing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks to you, Madam Chairman.
Sir.
Should I translate? I don't know who's going to be translating for him.
Sí.
Say that again.
I can translate too, whatever you prefer.
Okay,
I can step in as well.
Oh, yeah. And
Please do.
we're all like Spanish-English.
please do. So we can take turns.
I cannot translate.
Well, we thank you for putting it together.
De acuerdo, de acuerdo. Sí, muchísimas... ¿Está encendido aquí o no? Sí. Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias, antes que nada, tanto a los presentes, amigo, un fuerte abrazo, como a todos los integrantes del Congreso y del Senado de esta gran nación y a la presidencia, que han sido, vital importancia para que personas como yo podamos estar aún con
Thank you very
vida.
much to everybody who's allowed me to be here in the presidency of the Congress, and yeah.
Y oyendo hablar sobre lo que ha causado el comunismo en estas
Hearing you
naciones,
about what communism has caused to all our nations,
Venezuela, Polonia, Norcorea, Cuba,
Venezuela,
Hungría
Poland, North Korea, Hungary,
y otras muchas que aquí no aparecen.
and many others that are not here shown.
Recuerdo que el cubano más conocido, más universal, José Martí,
I remember the most famous and well-known Cuban, José Martí,
cuando aún no existía ninguna nación con un régimen comunista,
when there was still no communist-ruled nation,
escribió desde tierras norteamericanas
wrote from North American lands
un artículo donde dejaba muy claro que ese tipo de socialismo, tenga el nombre que tenga,
wrote an article that left very clear that that type of socialism, no matter where it comes from,
sería la futura esclavitud.
would be the future slavery.
La mejor prueba de que los comunistas que intentan llegar al poder en naciones democráticas son unos estafadores
The best evidence that the communists that try to get to power in democratic nations are scam artists
es que tanto Fidel Castro como Hugo Chávez
is
como
that both Fidel
Mandani
Castro, Hugo Chavez, and Mandani
niegan siempre que son comunistas.
always deny being communists.
Cuando logran lo que quieren, entonces alardean que eran comunistas desde la cuna.
And when they achieve what they want, they claim that they were communists from birth.
Yo soy nieto de un emigrado español.
I'm a grandson of a Spanish immigrant
Llegó a Cuba a finales de la década de 1930.
who arrived to Cuba at the end of the 1930s decade.
Trabajando muy fuerte, logró levantar una tienda
Working very hard, he was able to lift up a store
con la que alimentaba y atendía a su familia.
with which he fed and helped his family.
Sin saber lo que estaba haciendo, decidió colaborar con el ejército rebelde.
Without knowing what he was doing, he chose to collaborate with the rebel army.
Cuando Fidel Castro triunfó y se declaró marxista-leninista,
But when Fidel Castro triumphed and declared himself a Marxist-Leninist,
mi abuelo entró en tal crisis que murió más de tristeza que de enfermedad.
my grandfather entered in such sadness that he died more of sadness than of disease.
Yo crecí en un hogar marcado por el dolor de la gran estafa de Fidel Castro.
I grew up in a household marked by the great scam of Fidel Castro.
Y como parece que no era lo suficientemente listo, repetía en la calle y en la escuela lo que mi familia decía dentro del hogar.
And I just repeated outside my household what my family said inside the home.
Y cada vez que decía que el comunismo o que Fidel Castro había estafado, había engañado a todo el pueblo de Cuba,
And every time I said that Fidel Castro and communism had scammed the entire people of Cuba,
siendo un niño terminaba en la dirección de la escuela y en la unidad policial más cercana.
being a child, I would end up in the principal's office and in the closest police unit.
Mi padre terminaba salvándome de aquella situación prometiendo de que él no sabía de dónde yo sacaba aquellas ideas y que yo no lo iba a seguir repitiendo.
My dad would always pull me out of trouble by claiming that he didn't know where I was getting that from and saying that I would never repeat those ideas again.
Y cualquiera puede creer que decía cosas muy graves sobre el régimen,
And everybody could believe that I was saying very great things about the regime.
pero no, lo único que decía eran cosas como,
The only things I was saying are things like,
en una clase de economía política,
in a political economy class,
la profesora decir que la Unión Soviética avanzaba a pasos acelerados,
the professor would say that the Soviet Union was advancing at a very fast pace,
mientras Estados Unidos retrocedía.
while the United States was going backwards.
Como escuchaba oculto emisoras de onda corta,
Because I was able to listen hidden radio emissions,
metían preso a cualquiera por oír emisoras por onda corta.
they could put you in jail. They put people in jail for listening to the radio.
Levantaba la mano y le decía a la profesora, eso no es cierto.
I would raise up my hand and say, teacher, that is not true.
La ventaja de Estados Unidos o de la Alemania Occidental sobre Rusia o la Alemania comunista es enorme.
The advantage of the United States or West Germany over the Soviet Union or the East Germany was humongous.
Ahí se acababa la clase.
And that's when the class ended.
La profesora me tomaba por la mano violentamente
The teacher would violently take me from my hand
y me llevaba a la dirección para
and
que
take
me
me to the
analizasen.
principal's office.
Así que cuando escucho o veo
So every time when I hear or see
que a muchas personas y a muchos jóvenes en los Estados Unidos se le olvida lo que es en realidad del comunismo,
that many people and young people in America forget the truth of what communism is,
nos vemos obligados a mostrar imágenes como esta,
we are forced to show images like this one,
donde la única diferencia que hay entre un campo de concentración de la Alemania nazi
where the only difference between this and an image from a concentration camp in Nazi Germany
o una prisión comunista en 2026 en Cuba
or a communist prison in 2026 in Cuba
es que las fotografías de la Alemania nazi que encontramos generalmente son en blanco y negro
is that the images from Nazi Germany are generally in black and white,
y las de lo que está sucediendo en Cuba son a todo color.
and the ones in Cuba are in color.
Cuando vemos congresistas demócratas que van a La Habana
When we see Democrat congressmen who go to Havana
y dicen allá y luego repiten aquí
and say there and then repeat here
que lo que está pasando en Cuba es culpa de la administración estadounidense,
that what happens in Cuba is the fault of the U.S. administration,
le recordamos que esos dirigentes comunistas con los que ellos hablan,
we remind them that those communist leaders that they speak with
todos están muy bien alimentados,
are all very well fed.
tienen medicinas y muy buenas clínicas,
They have medicine and great clinics.
tienen los mejores autos y las mejores mansiones,
They have the best cars and the best mansions.
mientras el pueblo no tiene comida, no
While
tiene
the people don't
medicina,
have food, don't have health care,
no tiene hospitales que merezcan ese nombre,
they don't have hospitals that deserve that name,
no tienen transporte
they don't have transportation,
y muchos no tienen ni siquiera un hogar donde vivir.
and many of them don't even have a home to live in.
Cuando escuchamos a esos políticos demócratas que elogian al régimen castrocomunista,
When we hear those Democrat politicians who praise that communist regime,
le decimos, aprovechando la amistad que tienen con ellos, entren con la prensa a las prisiones cubanas y muestren al mundo qué cosa es el infierno en la tierra.
we tell them, take advantage of your friendship with the Cuban government and go with the press into the prisons and show the world the reality of what's happening there.
Ir a Cuba, hablar con los dirigentes del Partido Comunista,
Going to Cuba to speak with the Communist Party leaders
es lo mismo que ir a la Alemania nazi o a la Corea del Norte o a la Unión Soviética, por suerte desaparecida,
It's the same as going to Nazi Germany, to the North Korea, and what was the other country? And the Soviet Union,
a cenar o a festejar con los que oprimen a sus pueblos.
to have dinner and party with the people who oppress their people.
Pasé más de 12 años y medio en las cárceles del régimen.
I spent more than 12 years in the regime's prison.
Sé lo que es tortura física y psicológica,
I know what is physical and psychological torture,
hambre extrema.
extreme hunger.
Vi matar hombres con golpes de barras metálicas.
I saw men being killed with metal bars.
Vi morir presos por tuberculosis y desnutrición combinada.
I saw inmates die of tuberculosis and malnutrition combined.
Eso nadie me lo contó.
Nobody told me that.
Lo viví y lo sufrí en carne propia.
I lived it and I suffered it in my own skin.
Y cerca de 800 presos políticos lo siguen viviendo en las cárceles del régimen cubano.
And I know that the 800 political prisoners continue to live it in the prisons of the Cuban regime.
En fin, que acá la juventud y todos los estadounidenses deben de tener muy presente un chiste de un cubano, un humorista cubano nombrado Tito Hernández.
The youth and the American people should know this joke told by a famous Cuban, Tito Hernández.
Y con ello concluyo.
And with that, I conclude.
El amigo Carlos Jiménez mostró varias fotografías de autos en la Alemania comunista y en la Alemania libre.
Our friend Carlos Jimenez showed a picture of cars in the free Germany and the communist Germany.
Dice el humorista cubano que por el muro de Berlín
The comedian from Cuba said that under the Berlin Wall or around the Berlin Wall,
antes de que los alemanes lo derrumbasen,
before it was taken down,
iban dos niños,
there were two children,
uno por el lado comunista y uno por el lado capitalista.
one on the communist side, one on the capitalist side.
El del lado capitalista iba en un triciclo y llevaba una manzana muy roja en la mano.
The one on the on the capitalist side had a little bike and had a red apple on his hand.
El del lado comunista iba sin nada.
And the one on the communist side had nothing.
Muy común para el pueblo en los países comunistas.
Very common for people in communist countries.
El niño del lado capitalista se burla del niño comunista diciéndole: tengo un triciclo y tengo una manzana y tú no lo tienes.
The kid in the capitalist side mocks the kid in the communist side, saying, "Look, I have a bike and an apple, and you don't."
Y el niño del lado comunista le responde:
And the kid on the communist side responds,
pero yo tengo comunismo y tú no lo tienes.
"But I have communism and you don't."
Y el niño del lado capitalista le contesta:
And then the kid from the capitalist side responds,
si yo quiero, yo lo tengo.
"If I want it, I'll have it."
Y el niño del lado comunista replica:
And then the kid from the communist side responds again,
tenlo si tú quieres y te vas a quedar sin triciclo y sin manzana.
"Have it if you want, and you have no bike and no apple."
Así que si esta gran nación quiere retroceder a la edad de piedra,
So if this nation wants to go back to the Stone Age,
que sigan votando por individuos como Mandani.
keep
Muchas
voting for
gracias.
people like Mamdani. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn it over to Daniel.
Yes.
Very, very well said.
Well, thank you for having me. And
Daniel DiMartino is a survivor of Venezuela, and he's also a Manhattan Institute fellow.
yes, and by the way, we have something in common, Representative, in that my parents also owned a gas station in Venezuela. All these stories, I feel like, are very well connected. And the interesting thing about Venezuela, and why I think the story of Venezuela is important, and my story is not really exceptional, I would say, like Jose Daniel, who suffered tremendously personally. It's very average for what happened in Venezuela. And with average, I mean, I'm just one of over 8 million people who left the country. And it's 8 million people, it's nearly a third of the population. And my parents had a gas station and a great life. We had an apartment, we had car, we had a car, I went to school, and then suddenly things began changing. And how did they change? Well, suddenly there was no milk in the grocery store, then there was no meat, then things became hard to find, then we had to line up in the grocery store, then we had to pull up our ID in order to buy groceries, then they assigned us a day of the week in which we would go to the grocery store, right? And then we had to put our fingerprint in a scanning machine so that the government would tell us what we were allowed to purchase and what we were not allowed to purchase. Then of the things that we were allowed to purchase, the prices went so high with hyperinflation that we couldn't fit the cash in our pockets, and people had to carry backpacks to get cash from the banks. And you might say, well, why don't you just use a credit card or a debit card? Well, no, they controlled interest rates, so nobody would issue you a credit card. So why not a debit card? Well, you need what for the debit card to work in a store? You need a point, right, to scan it, right, to put it in. That needs what? Electricity. There's no electricity. Venezuela is the only country in history that had hyperinflation and a shortage of cash at the same time. You might wonder, how is that possible? Isn't inflation caused by too much cash? Yes, in the 1920s when all money was printed, but not in the 2020s when it's electronic. They ran out of money to print cash in Venezuela, so there was no cash, there was a lot of electronic money, and then the cash traded at a premium over electronic money. It's as if I told you, I know this is kind of like hard to grasp for the human mind, but it's as if I told you, give me $100 in cash, I'll Venmo you $120. That's exactly what people had to do. So daily life became very difficult. Imagine having no power for many hours. Power comes and goes. It's not just that, it's that your equipment at home can get damaged from the power outages. Then you lose your fridge. What happens if you lose your fridge and there's no food? The food rots, right? And then it's a disgrace, not because of the fridge, but because of the food. What happens when you're in high school, like I was, and suddenly the teacher has to go? Class is dismissed. There's chicken at the grocery store. I need to go line up. That's what happens. Because people have to line up when the demand outstrips supply. That's what happens when you impose price controls. So this is how Venezuela was destroyed. It's really no wonder. When I was a kid, what really woke me up, and I saw this happening in front of me, is I went to my school library to understand why was Venezuela's economy going down so terribly. And I picked up a book by Milton Friedman, Free to Choose. And in that book, they didn't ban those in Venezuela back then, at least just yet. And we already had internet, unlike Cuba, so that was helpful. And there I learned, actually, Venezuela was not doing anything unique. Venezuela was not doing anything new. Venezuela was just doing what Cuba had done, what the Soviet Union had done, what Eastern Europe had done. And I figured the outcome is going to be the same, and we're all going to starve to death. And that's indeed what happened. Millions of people fled after I had already figured that out. But the only reason I figured this out is because I lived it. It's not because I'm smarter or special. It's because I lived it. So I say the only good thing about having lived under socialism is that you learn how bad it is. And so you don't want to make those same mistakes. What's concerning to me is that after I came to America a decade ago, I learned that there were actually people who believed in these ideas, who believed that what happened in Venezuela was not due to socialism, but, you know, it's just another corrupt government. Well, guess what? Most countries are corrupt. There are corrupt people in the US government, too. Remember Senator Menendez? I don't want to touch sensitive subjects, but I mean, there are corrupt people in every government in the world. There are many corrupt countries. Not many countries have 8 million people flee from their country, a third of the population. Not many countries starve to death, even corrupt countries, because you have to take people's freedom for that to happen. Even countries that are dictatorships. Do you see people starving in the streets of Dubai, even during the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz? No. Do you see refugees flowing out of Saudi Arabia when oil prices go down? Do you even see countries that are sanctioned starve to death? No. So why is Venezuela, why is Cuba, why are all these socialist countries different? Because the common denominator is that they destroy free enterprise. You cannot start a business, you cannot feed your family, therefore you die and you flee. It's that simple. And I want to show you a chart because this debunks the lie that the so-called democratic socialists say about what socialism is. And this is the ranking in the Economic Freedom Index of 3 countries since 1970, Chile, Venezuela, and Denmark. So if you say, well, Daniel, we just want to be like Denmark, right? Denmark constantly ranks in the top 20, top 10 of economically free nations in the world. It's actually gotten more economically free over time. Venezuela was actually much more economically free during a period in the 1970s. Today, Venezuela ranks dead last in the Economic Freedom Index. Well, North Korea and Cuba are not ranked. But the point is, there's never been a country so free as Venezuela who became so unfree. That's the difference. And also that did it democratically, at the beginning at least. Because as we know, and as the White House showed recently, President Trump, they have been trying and rigging the elections for now 2 decades, right? Because they entered democratically, but they never leave democratically. Something that, by the way, also Mayor Mamdani of New York City praised in a tweet that he deleted from 2013, saying that Venezuela would be a great election observer. Yeah, maybe after this all ends, we'll be great election observers. But clearly Venezuela was not a great election observer because they were rigging the elections. So what can I deduce if you think that Venezuela has great elections is that you want to rig the elections. That's just 2 + 2 = 4. The other thing that concerns me is that because people buy this lie and they don't have a reference point, they think they're voting for what Norway, what Sweden, what Denmark does when they're actually voting for Venezuela. Most people don't know this, but in Norway, in Denmark, in Sweden, in Iceland, and in Finland, corporations pay a lower corporate tax than in the United States, even after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Most people don't know that. Even, by the way, than in the state of Florida. So is that what socialism is? Because if that's what it is, I want to copy that. I want to lower corporate tax. Is it just about taxes? Then why government grocery stores? Because remember, if healthcare is a human right, and therefore we need government healthcare, then food must be a human right too, right? Food is more important than healthcare. So we need government grocery stores and government farms, right? But we don't even need to go abroad to understand how socialism works and government things work. You know, Congressman, you were showing housing in Cuba. Why don't we go to NYCHA in New York City? Let's go to American public housing. We don't have to go to other countries. Who wants to live in NYCHA? I challenge every socialist to go get the government as a landlord. I challenge people to get government health care. How is the Indian Health Service going in the Indian reservations? How is the VA relative to private hospitals? How is USPS relative to FedEx? They lost $9 billion in fiscal year 2025, USPS, all for the privilege of getting junk mail. I know that's also not politically popular to attack USPS, but I say it because imagine the government didn't just have USPS or Amtrak, which I took, by the way, on the way here. Imagine the government didn't just have that. Imagine the government had Walmart. Imagine the government had Bank of America. There are members of Congress who want a government bank in USPS. They proposed those bills. Government banking. So that the government is your landlord, the place that feeds you, the place that gives you health care, the place that employs you, right? Jobs for all. The government becomes your master because the price of free things is actually your freedom. That is my worry about what's happening here in America.
Thank you very much. And I just want to point out, when we talk about free food and all of the government run, seizing the means of production in Venezuela in 2017, which was the height of the economic crisis there, they reported, the average Venezuelan reported 24-pound loss in weight.
We call it Maduro's diet.
Because of the lack of food. And over 60% of Venezuelans surveyed said that during the previous 3 months, they had woken up hungry because they did not have enough money to buy food. Richest country in South America, that's what happened to it under socialism and communism. Mike Gonzalez, survivor of Communist Cuba and Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Congressman, for being here. I'm going to time myself so I don't go too long. I was in Prague, in the Czech Republic 2 weeks ago, and I had the morning off, and I wanted to go to the Museum of Communism. So I went to the desk, and I asked him the directions, and he said, "Sir, you don't know communism. It was horrible. It was a nightmare. You don't want to go to this museum. Go to the Museum of Fine Arts. You'll see beautiful things." I didn't tell him that I grew up in communism, but I ended up doing what he said, and I had a great time. I don't like talking about my life in communism. In fact, I never talk about it. I left Cuba, thank God, like you. I thank my mother for taking me out over 50 years ago. I love this country for that reason. And I could tell you, I don't have his experiences, but I can tell you of my experiences. I could tell you being an altar boy at a local parish, in rocks landing in the middle of Mass from a mob being outside. I could tell you about being interrogated by thugs at the age of 11 in a room in the middle of the night. But I'll tell you the worst story. In Prague, I do what I always do when I'm in a communist country. I ask people if they were pioneers. Well, they were pioneers is the Hitler Youth of communism. And everybody I have asked, in Mongolia, in China, in the parts of the Soviet Union I've been to, in Eastern Europe, everybody was a pioneer. I wasn't a pioneer. My family decided that we were going to resist, and that we were going to try to stay out of prison, but we're not going to get along to go along. So I was put in a private school, in the French school, not because my father loved the French, but he hated the communists more. That was the last private school in Havana until Castro closed it, I think in 66 or 67. I had to go to the communist school. The first thing the teacher did was bring me up to the front of the class and said, "This is little Miguel Gonzalez. Until today, his family thought he was too good to be with you. Now take your seat." And then the real harassment began. The principal, who was a nice, kindly old man, used to come and say in front of the class, "You go to church on Sundays. In fact, you're an altar boy. I understand this. So you dress like a girl, basically, every Sunday." And he would then try to force say, "You have to become a pioneer. We don't care." And I would go home and I would explain to my father, and my father said, "This is really hard on you, but we're not going, this is an important lesson. You have to say no." Then one day, the principal forced the pioneer uniform on me. And I went home in the afternoon. I said, "Dad, you should look up." And he saw me, and he went into his bedroom where he had kept his gun hidden under a tile. Because one of the first things the communists did was they asked you to hand over your guns. And then he said, "I'm going to shoot the principal because this doesn't happen in my family." His mother, my grandmother, locked him in. I said, "Well, Miguel, you're going to have to go through me." My mother came. She said, "Let me take care of this. Please let me take care of this." She got the uniform, threw it at the principal, and said, "If you ever do this again, I'm not going to be able to control my husband. He is going to kill you. He'll go to prison, but he will kill you. Do you want to die?" And I've written this for the Wall Street Journal because I was with the Wall Street Journal for 11 years. And then he left me alone. And that taught me a lesson about bullies. You stand up to a bully, and they leave you alone because he knew they could send my father to prison. But why did communists try to control the schools and they didn't like church? Because they tried to control the message. And communists hate the culture of the country they take over. Castro said this. He said a revolutionary has to be impatient with the status quo and hate the culture. He has to try to change it. The Bolsheviks hated Russian culture. The Chinese communists hated Chinese culture. The Cuban communists hated Cuba. Everything that came before them was bad. The Spanish period, the Republic, everything was putrid and racist and bad. Which brings us to today. Because we're talking here about Mamdani. We're talking about Daria Lisa. We're talking about Katie Wilson in Seattle. They didn't come out of nowhere. Somebody told them that our society is rotten. Somebody told them that we live in a country that is structurally oppressive. Somebody told them we live in a country that's systemically racist. And what do you do when you believe that things are structurally oppressive or systemically racist? You have no other choice but to change the structures of the system. And that is what this kind of rhetoric is intended to do. Our schools created Mamdani. When Mamdani says on July the 4th, they say America is exceptional because we're powerful and rich. Nobody says that. I work for the Heritage Foundation. Before that, I spent 11 years at the Wall Street Journal. Nobody seriously thinks of American exceptionalism. We think we're wealthy and powerful because we're exceptional and because we base everything on natural right. So the last thing I want to say to you is I testified this morning here on the Smithsonian. It's one of the things that I do. I'm going to come back and testify again tomorrow. Please, the Smithsonian should have taught Mamdani this. The school should have taught Mamdani this. Nobody did. Fix the Smithsonian. And I know you know why I'm looking to you. Fix the Smithsonian. Work with the Board of Regents. And for heaven's sakes, do not build the Latino Museum. Yeah. It is going to be an incubator of hatred and grievances against the United States. I met Jorge Zamanillo, nice guy. But there's nothing he can do with the exhibit that they stopped was being curated by communists, by actual communists, who wanted to say that capitalism had been bad for Hispanics. I'm going to leave it there. Obviously, a lot more to say, but it's 6 minutes. There's a lot of people here who want to speak. And thank you again for doing this. This is really important.
Thank you. I'd like to now turn the platform over to Pastor Ezra Jin, survivor of Chinese communism and founder of the Zion Church.
我是在中国34年传福音服侍教会的新教的牧师。
I am a pastor who's been preaching in China for 30 years.
中国宪法里边，宪法36条认为中华人民共和国有宗教信仰的自由。
The Chinese Constitution guarantees the right for religious freedom in China as well.
但是这个国家实际上党国共产党高过宪法，
But in China, the party is actually on top of the Constitution.
而且呢，这个共产党是强烈的主张无神论，实际上把宗教当作是一种迷信活动来这么看待。
And the Chinese Communist Party sees religion as a type of superstition and is very against religion and as violently atheist.
所以这70年来，宗教群体，特别是像基督教这样西方背景的宗教呢，受到歧视，然后要受到压力，甚至是迫害。
So in the last 70 years, religion, just such as Christianity, but others as well, have been looked down upon or and sometimes also persecuted.
2025年10月9号，我们在10几个城市里边，我们西安教会的牧师们同时被抓。
On October 2025, several of our church leaders were arrested across 10 cities.
我们看守在中国南方的一个城市的看守所。
We were all detained in a city in the south of China.
我们想要聘请律师也受到很大的拦阻。
We tried to get lawyers, and that was also very difficult.
我们诉的时候的罪是信息网络罪，
At the time when they arrested us, it was on the charge of illegal use of information
但是
online.
送到检察院的时候是非法经营罪，再加上诈骗。
By the time they sent us to the prosecutors and to the court, the charges changed to fraud and illegal business operation.
中国政府呢，把基督教会当作是诈骗集团。
The Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, sees Christianity and the activities as illegal business and just like a defrauding organization.
7月3号，我从监狱里提审，然后没有跟我说任何其他的，把我送到飞机场。
On September 3rd, when they transferred me out of prison, they didn't say anything to me. They just sent me to the airport.
我呢进到机场飞机里边以后，旁边坐着美国领事，他就告诉我，金牧师你自由了。
After I sat in the airplane, I found that the person next to me greeted me and said, Pastor Jen, I am from the embassy, the U.S. embassy. You are free now.
我特别谢谢我们被抓以后，卢比奥国务卿第3天就强烈的发声明。
We're so thankful for Secretary Rubio for after I was detained, Secretary Rubio in 3 days immediately called for our release.
我也特别的谢谢44位议员，2党议员，他们共同发表声
And
明。
we're just so grateful and thank for the 44 congressional members who have written letters for us advocating for my release.
更是特别的感谢特朗普总统呢，直接去北京，在习近平主席面前要我。
And we're extremely grateful for President Trump to have raised my case and asked for me directly to Xi Jinping when he was in China.
所以24小时之前，我是在监狱不到1天，我就到那个洛杉矶的那个海边，跟8年没有见到的家人一起看美国独立日的 Fire State， 然后又像做梦一样。
So in less than a day, I was sent from inside the Chinese prison to being in America, watching fireworks at the Independence Day, eating with my family that I haven't seen in 8 years.
那个给我签证的领事，我是没有签证进到美国的。
I didn't even have a visa. We didn't even have time to give me a visa to come into the U.S.
那个领事给我签证说，你是美国独立250年特别的总统的 guest， 我们特别高兴能够非监禁的牧师能够参与我们的自由。
When I came to LA, when they stamped my passport with a visa, they said to me that we are so happy that we can share this 250th celebration and to welcome you into freedom, Pastor Jen.
但是我的好多同工牧师们，现在8位还在监狱里。
But I have 8 colleagues and pastors from Zion Church that are still inside prison today.
这里的莎拉，她的丈夫是在美国受到最好教育的博士，他回到中国跟我一起建立西安教会。现在还在监狱。
Next to me, Sarah Sue is the wife of Pastor Franklin Wang Lin, who is in prison still today. He is a phenomenal scholar and graduated from Wheaton College with a PhD in Old Testament theology.
去年6月开始，他们在5个城市里边被赶，所以房子也租不了。孩子在6个国际学校里边已经录取了，但是政府给他压力，不让他上学。
Since June of 2025, her family has experienced so much pressure from the Chinese Communist Party, and she was unable to even rent any houses inside China. She was forced to go from cities to city trying to find housing, and her kids were also unable to go to school.
中国有几千万基督徒。
China has many millions of Christians.
现在还有好多牧师在监狱里。
There are also hundreds of pastors also inside prison today.
我希望各位继续为受逼迫的这些基督徒，还有其他的群体，美国希望能够继续出声。
We really hope that the members here can continue to press for the Christians as well as other prisoners of conscience inside China to continue to voice for them and to ask for their be the voice for the voiceless.
谢谢你们。
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's an eye-opening story, and we're happy that you're here with us in the United States, and we pray for the release of Pastor Wang as well. I'd like to turn over to our last speaker. Karina Lipsman is the survivor of Soviet communism and director of external relations for victims of communism.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, these stories are definitely very touching and very important to hear, because we see a lot of what's happening today with the next generation who just does not understand the terrible evils of communism. So I was born in Soviet Ukraine. I was born in the Soviet Union, and I remember as soon as I would walk out of the house to go play with my friends, my grandmother would instantly say, "Karina, if anyone talks to you, if anyone asks anything about your family, don't say anything, just walk away." And as a child, you just don't understand what that means. Why wouldn't you be able to talk to people, right? And soon I found out that as soon as you said something, as soon as you showed that you came into some sort of wealth, even if it was a new pencil box for school, they would automatically question where you got it from. Did you have ties? Did you sell something? Did you make a deal? And that was something that was instilled into me at an early age. And I remember standing in the bread lines. I remember going through that, everything we talk about, but it's true. And I also remember in school, my first grade math class, we had a math problem. And the problem was you have 5 loaves of bread and you have 2 greedy Americans who took 1 loaf each. How many are you left with? And so the obvious question is none, because greedy Americans take all the bread. But from an early age, you were indoctrinated. It was in math, it was in science, it was in literature, it didn't matter. So by the time you graduated high school, you were already indoctrinated. You were already a communist. So by the time you got to college, you just started the revolution. And I remember coming to the States, didn't speak English, grew up in Section 8 housing in Baltimore City on food stamps, raised by a single mother. And we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Soviet Union, and we had a 2-bedroom apartment. And I thought we were the richest people in the world. I really did. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. However, we talk about it today, and we talk about, how ungrateful sometimes we can be because we are afforded these freedoms on a regular basis, and we forget what we take for granted, what so many people around the world pray for every single day. I wish I would have won my election in 2022 so I could be up here with you all and fighting against communism, but I appreciate what you're doing because, you know, Congresswoman Salazar, your Crucial Communism Teaching Act is something that we at Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation really do support because we have a curriculum. We actually have a teacher training session right now at our museum where we have over 30 teachers who came from across the country because they understand how important this is. Educating the next generation, because if we don't have anywhere to go, we're done. America's the greatest country in the world. People don't flee from America, they flee to America. And I just want to thank you so much for having this.
We'll now turn it over if any members of the media have questions. We now have a Q&A session.
Thank you.